I like to use this deadmau5 logo as an example. And I use it as a recreation example. So I'm going to go through and actually recreate this and just demonstrate how we can look at a logo and often see basic shapes and not have to use, for example, the pen tool to do an all-out trace of what may be a sketch or a rough concept that we've developed. So this is a great one because it's incorporating both typography and an icon. It's got the symbol here, the iconic dead mouse, mouse face, we'll call it, mouse head, and then it has the word mark as well. So what I'm going to do is just go through and recreate this working basically from shapes. I'm going to be using the pathfinder, and then of course I'll use the type tool. And in the end, what I want to do is avoid having any cross paths, but I also want to make it the most efficient file as possible. And what I mean by that is making it in such a way that if this was a single color, for example, we wouldn't have to pull anything apart or make any kind of structural changes to it. We're simply just changing the color of one item. So I'm going to start with my shape tools, and I'm going to go to the ellipse tool because I'm seeing here that they're essentially in the face. There's of course the circle, and the ears are really they're ovals, and then we have circles for the eyes. So I'm going to build the basic structure of the face, and I'm just building over top of this. So I'm starting with a circle, and when I do this, I'm of course using my shift key. I hold down the space key if I want to move this circle up as I draw it. So I hold space to move it, let go of space. I'm still holding my shift key while I click and drag, and I'll just get that as close as possible. Now I'm actually going to switch this to stroke, and I'm going to give that stroke a brighter color just so I can see what I'm doing here. And I'll get that a little closer there. This is a pretty low res JPEG that I'm retracing, but that's okay. Because it is basic shapes, I can get away with it. If it had a lot of detail in it, then I would probably want something that's higher resolution. So I'm just going to get the basic parts here. Now, this we can see, it really is an oval that's been turned and skewed. So I'm going to try just starting here with an oval that I'm going to modify. And what I'm looking for is the axis, really trying to find the axis of this shape. So the axis means that halfway point, that halfway line. So using a line tool, I can kind of gauge that it's maybe around there, so it's a little difficult to tell. But once I get this oval rotated and placed, I'll start to find that. So again, it's just using the basic shapes, starting with an oval, and I'll rotate it. And I'm really just trying to match what I'm seeing here. Now, keep in mind, for a logo that you may be working on, you might be working on off from a sketch, or you may be working from a digital concept that was maybe done roughly with the pen tool, or even a brush or pencil tool. But when we get into the logo, we have to do that refining. So I'm just using my direct select cursor here to adjust this anchor point. To move it around, I'm really just trying to match this alignment here, this edge here. And then I'll go over and do this other one. Now, when you're working with Illustrator, it really is ideal to analyze something from the point of basic shapes first. That becomes one of the most helpful aspects of working with Illustrator. If you can find the basic shapes in an illustration, in a logo, in a design, then you're halfway there. You're not having to use the pen tool, but you're also eliminating or reducing the number of vector points that you're using. You know, in this, with 3 essentially circles, I only have 12 vector points, where if I was using the pen tool, I would have a lot more, and it would be less smooth and a little more complicated. Okay, so I'm just going to pull a copy of these aside for a moment. And we can see there's our basic shapes with a little modification. So I'm going to unify these using my path tool because I don't want those cross paths. Again, right there we have cross paths. That's something that we want to eliminate as we go. So this ends up being its own shape. And then now I'm going to do the eye here. So that again, just a circle. And I can punch that into this shape using my minus front. So there we go. And then here we've got just the edge of the other eye. So what I could have done, I'm going to go back a moment before I do that unify or the minus front. I'm just going to take a copy of this circle and move it up, and then I'm going to use that just to try and get it to land in a spot where I can cut that out. So again, being low res, a little difficult to see it. It's a fair bit smaller. Now, for the sake of brevity, I'll keep it out about there. I'd probably want to be a little more detailed with it, but I'm going to accept this for now. So I'm going to punch this one into there, so using minus front, and I'll do the same for this one, minus front. And finally I have the smile there. So again, that's another circle. So I'm going to grab my circle and I'm going to find, using my space bar to move it around as I draw, I'm going to try and find the arc for that bottom part. Now I may have to let go of the shift key to get it to align because it's not a perfect circle. And then I'm going to use I'm holding Option down, and I'm going to click and make a clone of that. I could have also just drawn another circle. And I'm just going to pull this to find the match on that line as well. So about there. And I'll select, so I'm going to shift select, holding shift. I'm going to select the circle that made the bottom part of the mouth. And I'm going to do, again, minus front, because this top one that I made as a copy of the bottom one is in front of the bottom one. So I'll minus front. I have both items selected. That leaves me with that. And I can punch that. So unite. So there now we've got the more detailed face in white, or in blue, the outline, and we'll make it to white in a moment. Now I'm going to add in the type. So this is, our goal here is to maintain this as all one single shape. So this looks like, this typeface, it looks like Helvetica. I think it's actually Arial Black. Either will do, Helvetica Bold or Arial Black. And I'm pretty sure it's Arial Black, so that's what I'm going to do it in. Sometimes, especially when it's low resolution, Arial and Helvetica look quite similar. And then I'm just going to get this sized. So again, I'm going to choose another color there just so it stands out a bit more for us. And I'll size it up using my shift key, of course, scaling type. And I'll choose one of the letters. In this case, I'm going to choose the number 5 and get that sized. Now, I'm going to move it down to the D here so that I can close the tracking, and I might have to do some kerning adjustment there. So I'm going to highlight all of that and hold Option down, use my left arrow. I'm going to just get those to line up. So here, I'm going to move that D out a bit. So it looks like I have to go a little bigger with the size here just to get that to match. And again, for the sake of brevity, it might have to be less than 100% accurate, but that's okay. The point is that these letters have a very slight overlap. They're touching, so we're going to eliminate that overlap in the end. So whenever I turn type into paths, I always make a copy of that. I always like to keep a live version, so I'm just going to make a copy up here using my Option key, and then I'll convert this to paths doing Command-Shift-O, or that would be create outlines. I call it paths, but it's also referred to as outlines, obviously. Command-Shift-O. Now it's all separate pieces. They're in a group right now, but they're still just shaped. If I ungroup them, Command-Shift-G, then I get these separate shapes. What I want to do is unify those. I want those to behave as a single shape. So I'm going to select all of them again, and I'm going to just lock this image. So Command-2 to lock that, and Shift select these to avoid getting the head with it. And then I'll use my Unite tool. Now I may have a little bit of, I missed the line here because if we look, it's probably not touching 100%. So I'm going to go back and undo, and I'm just going to make sure those have some overlap. So I'm going to use my direct select cursor here and Shift select that and just move those in there. Just creating that overlap. I probably should have closed the kerning between those, the D and the M, a little more. And now I can pull those all together with the Unite. There we go. Okay, so let's see what we have here. Doing Command-Y, there's our word mark. Command-Y again. Now I'm going to offset the path, but also notice the miter, that's what we refer to as the corners here, the miters are slightly rounded, so we need to pay attention to that. So I'm going to select my word mark and go to Object and Path and Offset Path. Now obviously that's too much, so I'm going to reduce it in here. And I'm just using my down arrow to do it point by point. I'm going to take it looks like 3 is just slightly too little, 4 is too much, so I'm going to try 3.5. That looks about right. And I'm going to do on the miter, I'm going to do round. And you see in the preview how it just rounds those edges off, gives it that rounded edge that we saw in the white version. So 3.5, so the offset is taking that actual path and making a new shape based on a very consistent space around that. All the way around that spacing is consistent. So I'll say okay. And by the way, using the preview, whenever you see preview, turn that on. That's going to show you what's going to happen before you say okay. It's better than just guessing, trying, it not being correct, going back and doing it again. Using previews shows you in real time what will happen when you say okay. It's not actually doing it yet. The option is there pretty much because some computers can't handle even showing the preview. They may run slow or something. For the most part now, any computer that you're doing this on is going to be able to handle preview. We'll say OK. And doing Command Y again. So we have our exterior shape, and then we have the interior. So I need to pull this all together. I have everything I need. And I'm just going to do Command Option 2 to unlock my original here, get that out of the way. I'm going to punch through with the original word mark that I made. I'm going to punch through that offset. So selecting the original there, and I'll just change that to white so we can see it for a moment. I'll use that, press Shift, do minus front. So there's our word mark. Now I want to unite the icon, the face, the head, with the offset of the word mark. So I'm going to just give it the exact same color. I'm just going to use my eyedropper to sample the attribute, so it'll do the same color fill with no stroke. And I made one error there in my timing. So the error that I made is that I knocked through the type before I unified the head with the offset. So I'm going to go back, undo, undo. So I've still got my original there, and I'm going to unify the offset with the head. And then I'll punch the word mark, because the word mark is also punching into the head here. So I'll unite those. And then what I'm going to do, just going to make a colored box here so that we can see. I'll send that to the back. So what I want for a truly efficient file here, I'm just going to lock this. What I want is to be seeing the background through here. And that means that we have a single shape logo here. So I'll take the word mark now, Shift select the grouping behind it. I'll just do Command Y so again you can see that this all became one. Command Y again, so Shift, select those, minus front, and then there's our single shape. So we call this a recreation. We recreated this logo, but we've done it efficiently. So now whenever I want to change the color on this, it's just a single color logo. There's no cross paths, it's one shape. Now if you wanted to have this on a background, so I'm just going to put a background there again. So let's say you wanted it white, and you wanted the word mark to be another color. You wanted the word mark, let's say we want it orange, for example. We're going to have to isolate that word mark. So we already did it here, but we're going to pretend we don't have that. And I would pull that out and get rid of this. Pull that out, just give it a color so we can see it. And then with my direct select, I'm going to remove everything around that word mark. So I'll drag across these anchor points here, just two, press delete and delete. And now I have to clean this up. So we're going to have some things that we have to punch through. So I'm just clicking in the middle of that counter of the 5 there, holding Shift and selecting the outside of the 5. And I'll do my minus front. And the A, there should be one for the A there. There it is. So when I did this one, it brought it to the front. So I'm going to send it to back. And I did that with the key commands. But you can also go to arrange and send to back. Now I'll be able to get the one for the A, hold Shift, minus front, and I'm going to have to do that a few more times. There is a faster way where I could do it, send it to back once, and then select all of these and make a compound path that I do one unite. In fact, I'll do that now. So I'll send that to back, select this one, hold Shift, select that one, hold Shift, select that one. I'll make them a compound path. So they're three separate shapes behaving as one. I'll make, and then hold Shift and do my minus front once. And I missed the one in the top of the E there. So I'll just get that. Okay, so there, if we did want to have the separate colored word mark, then that's how we would create it if we, of course, didn't have it in the first place. So I can bring that in. And you often see this is done when even just a single jump up or one or two, you get that sort of shadowing, right? That little bit of dimension. You often see that. So that's how you would efficiently develop a logo. You're avoiding those cross paths. You're working from basic shapes when you can. Sometimes, of course, we can avoid using the pen tool, but in this case, we were really able to use basic shapes and type to make what is otherwise a pretty cool logo.